So the first game we can see, and I've realised I'm a bit blurry, but we are, again, we've won another game. Doesn't really matter. There's minutes in the legs. We've had, again, lots of players to talk about. And again, not too much there's not too much to analyze in terms of formations, everything. But how did you find that?
I got to say, for me, because I'm a tactical nerd, I actually found it extremely interesting. So I'm probably the odd one out. I mean, look, it's just a pre-season friendly. So pre-season friendlies, especially the early ones, tend to be just about fitness more than anything. It was notable that we had like a lot of players who you'd think are going to be nowhere near the first team playing in this one. But I think regardless of that, we got a lot of interesting answers to questions we were asking. For example, what role would Wilfred Ndidi play this season? How would Ricardo be used? How are we going to use the rest of the team? Is Caleb Okoli any good? We can come to all of these things in a while. So I actually found it interesting. I think overall, if I compared it to the first time that Enzo played in pre-season, with Enzo, it seemed like I think a lot more structured and the patterns of play were there from right off. But for me, there's actually quite a bit to talk about. So obviously, tell me to shut up when ready. But I am looking forward to the Cooper era.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into the because again, there's some positives to it. Again, as you mentioned, I can bring yours up in a second. Again, I'll show you the initial formation,
Yeah,
and then I'll get you into because again, this is again a bit of a smorgasbord. It's not actual formation, but this was like the average positioning that I would see in that first half. So the back three of kind of Thomas, Cody, and Nelson. In terms of the backs, because again, Ricardo was kind of playing in this position, and we saw him as like in defense, it was kind of a 4-3-3 a little bit. And then a lot of the time, he was actually getting quite far up and providing down this right hand side. But
he
in terms of the
definitely
back
was.
three,
Yeah.
yeah, but you feel free to anywhere you want to go from there.
Yeah, I would say the big difference for me is Fatawu and Mabadidi were swapped over. But look, I think that's a good start. That's where we kind of were and what we're doing. So yeah, already it's pretty interesting. So last season. So yeah, right. Well, actually, do you mind if I bring up my screen? I think that's a
Yeah,
good
go
way
for it. Go
to
for it.
start it.
Let's put on that one.
So here he is, Big Steve. Steve Cooper is a blue. How's his era going to start? Well, look, this, you can see pictures of us watching the game here on the left. So that's how we kind of do it on Beyond the 90. So look, right from the very off, we're kicking from left to right. Ant with his beer, by the way. Got to love that picture. Clip that. So yeah, we're playing a 3-2-5 shape. So here you can see in the middle two, you've got Harry Winks. And look, wearing number 6. He's been wearing a number 25 for the last 8 years, I swear. But it's Wilfred Ndidi. And here we can see nearest the camera is actually Ricardo. So already there's a lot of changes that are going on. And look, I'll also say, look, this fella here, this is Steffi Mavadidi. And on the other side is Fatawu. So there's already huge changes here, right? So before we used to play like a 3-2-4-1, we used to have Steffi and Fatawu as wingers. In this game, we've kind of gone for more, are they wingers? Are they wing backs? We can kind of discuss that as we go forward. But that's how we kind of started the system. And then, yep, kind of coming into a bit of play. So here again, I've got Winks and Ndidi. I've tried to show that they're both together as a pair, which is kind of obvious. We were playing 3 around the back. You can only see 2 in picture here, but on the other side here, we'd have the other. This would be Ben Nelson. So actually, in this game, we didn't see any of the Danish lads. I think that's worth pointing out. So no Mads Hansen, no Yannick Vestergaard, no Victor Christensen. We believe they've been given an extra week to recover. Makes sense if they were away on international duty. So Ben Nelson, Luke Thomas was playing as a left centre back. Don't think he had the best game, but we can talk about that. And Connor Cody was the main distributor. Here we can see as well, we've got Ricardo on playing very high up here. You can see on the right. So that says to me it is more of a wing back stroke winger, depending on how you want to call it. And I think what's interesting is look at Casey McAteer's position. So he's operating, is this like a number 10? If you compare his position to the double pivot, it's definitely more of a cam type role. And this side, in this particular instance, it's actually, I believe this is Daka. So we'll see that this kind of position would change over time. So these are some things that I was picking up on. Here we can see when we're more in like the defensive shape. So here we can see that we're pressing with like a front 2. So Daka and Mavadidi are pushing up. We've got Fatawu here on the other side. We've got McAteer's going to drop back. And again, we kind of see the sort of shape. So this is more of a 4-4-2. It looks like out of possession, you'd kind of describe it as. Because here we don't see Ricky P in the picture. He'll have probably dropped back here to right back. But again, just some observations. Okay, but when we were playing, I'll be honest with you, I was getting really confused, really confused. I was like, what is going on here? Because there's obviously a lot of differences. What are we trying to do? So I'm not saying this is what we did, but as we were watching the game, I got on a bit of Google. I did know this already. I was like, what kind of tactics has Steve Cooper been using throughout his career? And so one thing I saw is that when he was in charge of Swansea, he did this kind of thing. So let's focus on the left-hand side here first. Right, so this is how we set up definitely from kickoff, right? We had the 3 centre backs, we had 2 pivots here. One was a sitting back, was the other one box to box, we can describe it. 2 kind of attacking wing backs, a cam. Remember that I pointed out Casey McAteer's position to you there, and 2 forwards rather than 1 forward. But what would happen is that as they would play, they would try and shift space and make space, and they would do that in the following way. And what you would see is these wide players would push up. The 2 double pivot here would become one would kind of support forwards, and the other one would kind of be more of a box forward, and we'd have kind of 2 forwards here. So were we doing that? I'm not 100% sure we were, but this is kind of my interpretation of a pattern of play that I saw in that game, in the first half at least, a lot. Second half less so, but I still think we were trying it. So what's happened here is we've still got the back 3. We can see we've got 2 wing backs that are pushing forwards, and Fatau is playing as one of them. We can see that at times Mavididi was the furthest man forward, and Daka would drop back here as kind of like a false 9. And as he would do, McAteer, who was the cam here, was kind of taking more of a wide role and running in behind. And in fact, he scored his goal doing that, although it was very Route 1 football, so perhaps not the best way of saying it. And indeed, he's here. So what are we trying to do here? So like I say, I feel that like Steve Cooper's been saying that how pre-season, and a lot of the players have been interviewed saying, we're not going to change things too much. The general principles will be in play, but we're just going to make like a few slight tweaks. And I think that's fair enough to say, because in general, we definitely try to play out from the back as much as possible. I think we were quite bad at it today, but I would say that we didn't necessarily have the best people in the team to do that. Like, are Ben Nelson and Luke Thomas going to be in the first team? Probably not. Where's Vestergaard? Interestingly, though, we didn't have Ricardo as one of the pivots. That could be an issue. We'll see. Although I think indeed he did his role well. I do think Harry Winks was pulling the strings a little bit in the first half. Why I think this is interesting, though, for example, if McAteer is kind of be used in this role, well, a player that we've been linked with quite heavily is Matteo Sule from Juventus. And if you look at his heat map, he has been taking on these kind of like both right and number 10 positions. And all of a sudden, if that was the case, I could maybe see someone like that fitting into this position. But look, he's not with the team. So let's not talk about who might be here. Let's see what we're doing. What I would say is I've put here that Daka would drop back, and that's the move that I saw the most. But it wasn't the only one. At times, it'd be Mavididi that would drop back, and Daka would go top. But the big difference is that I've noticed. So for sure, Fatau was only on the left-hand side, and he was used much more as a kind of more... He was definitely further back than forwards as he was last year. That's definitely something you got to call out. So I felt he was more of like a left wing back. He was used in that way at Sporting, by the way, before he came here, which is interesting. Mavididi, he definitely had a positional change. He was used much more as a kind of like, at times, he was the furthest man forward and almost a striker, I would say. If you look at the clips in the Villarreal friendly as well, he was the furthest man forward and playing more centrally. So he was still, I just want to make this clear, he wasn't just playing central. He was definitely sort of making more out to in type runs coming in from the left-hand side there. But he was at times definitely playing more central. So that's quite interesting that he would do that. Daka was nominally the striker that was playing up top, but he was dropping deep. The second half, we swapped this for Tom Cannon. But I think it was notable that he was dropping deep a lot. He did this a lot for us last season. He was acting like a false 9 to like make the play. So as I say, if you think about it, the idea here is if someone's marking Daka, they're going to get attracted to the ball and follow him. And then you've got 2 people running in behind to make the space, and you've got people shifting away, and that's what you're trying to do. So you're trying to keep some stability, but about doing that. Now, look, I just want to say is that we don't have much to go on. I really need to study the clips and go it. Like, we may not have done that formation. You know, some people are saying, no, it was just a 4-2-3-1. It was a 4-3-3. I think you can call it whatever you want to call it. I think in modern football, the way to look at it is what are you doing in possession? What are you doing out of possession? And how are you varying it up? I'm definitely want to follow this in possession shape because it's very different to last year. So I think the similar principles were for sure trying to play it out from the back. And I think also for sure this ability to kind of like move players around like chess pieces and to create space where there wasn't before. I think those 2 principles are definitely there. but it is definitely a totally different structure than it was last year. What are your thoughts on that?
I think with Daka as well, I think you're right. It was a lot more fluid going forward as well, where Daka would drop deep, but also he'd pick up on the left hand side a lot more that I was finding. Fatal, and he was taking the position that Fatal would normally take. So we were, especially in the first 20 minutes or so, we were winning the ball back in really high positions. Wolford and Diddy wasn't playing, he was playing alongside Winks in the second half, in the latter part of that first half. But in the first part, I noticed he was winning the ball back really high up, and that's something that we've not quite seen under Enzo before. And we know he can do it, but and then the more the game got on, I think he tucked in more and played as a double pivot alongside Winks.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with all of that. So yeah, more of a press to begin with, which kind of faded away, probably to be expected given the kind of like fitness levels of the team right now. I think you said one thing that was very interesting that I do agree with, and that was like the interchange of positions. And I felt, especially in the first half, I noticed that a lot. Like at times, I felt like Ricardo and McAteer here swapped over their positions in terms they were. At times, Daka felt like was playing on the right wing, and McAteer was playing in the space that he was there before. Now, as the game kept going on, that started to happen less and less. And I think that's understandable because we changed personnel. But I think what we're going to see with Cooper a lot more than Enzo is I think we're going to see rotations, right? And so the concept of a rotation is that you and I start as, let's say, the number 7 and the number 10, but at certain phases of play, I'm going to be the number 10 and you're going to be the number 7 and vice versa. And why do you do that? You do that because whoever's marking us has got a difficult problem, right? Do I go with the man or do I keep my space? And you can be screwed in different ways depending on what your decision is. And you've also got to do that as a team. So that's very interesting. So I think we are going to see that. But look, what I would say is I don't want to bring too much into it. We need to see us play a lot more. I'm very curious if Taxikara, what was the other guy? Was he called Michael Edwards? The one that used to think. He's another one, but he didn't do too much. There was a guy that always used to post the clips that we used to have on the channel.
Oh yeah. I can't remember his name, but yeah, that I remember who you talk about. He had the orange Leicester City shirt as his logo.
Yeah. A lot of us, I think that he actually worked for the club, so it'll be interesting to see if he posts this season because it might turn to being like Enzo's assistant all this time. And I'd be very curious to see what their take on it. Like I say, if there were, a recording of that match, I'd go back and watch it again. But look, we'll learn in the next couple of friendlies what we're going on.
Yeah.
What else can I say? Second half, we started making a lot of changes, understandably, and we changed the positions of players quite a few times, actually. So this isn't always correct. But in general, in the second half, what we ended up with is we brought on Caleb Okoli. He played both the right centre back and the left centre back. He scored an own goal as the right centre back. A bit unfortunate. We'll see that later. The double pivot was Chowdhury and Soumare. Chowdhury, I noticed there was a really good moment where he took the ball on the half turn, spun and played it behind, a bit like what Ricky P did last season. That was fantastic to see. He can add that to his game. That's exciting. Harry Suter played in the middle as the distributor. That's an interesting one. Luke was absolutely loving that. It was okay. I don't think he'll play that role necessarily, but he's physical. I do think that Steve Cooper definitely likes physicality. Soumare, I've got to say, I thought he was superb that second half. He was running the show. Do I think he can do it in a Premier League level? Will he even be with us? I don't know, but I'm just going to call it as I see it. I think he was very impressive in his role there. Maybe not surprising if you look at his profile and what he does. I think kind of keeping it simple, being able to take it on the half turn and spin and play it behind. He did it quite a few times. James Justin had a very interesting game because I definitely saw him play as the right wing back. I also saw him play as the right centre back, and I also saw him play as the left wing back at times. So he was all over the place. And we know that about JJ. He can do all those kind of things. And you know what I'll say? I think he was really decent in all those positions too. So that was interesting. Yeah. Then I think the source, we'll come to Tom Cannon in a moment. But for me, the two exciting players, and well, this could be interesting because this could actually be the future of Leicester City Football Club. So we had Will Alves, who, if we're being honest, we haven't seen him really play for Leicester in a long time. I think the last time he played had like a 10-minute cameo in the FA Cup before he got injured. If he hadn't got injured, we could have expected to see him in the team a lot longer. So he effectively was taking up Mavadidi's position. But I do think that in the second half, he was, hugging the touchline a lot more. In fact, Mavididi in this half was also hugging the touchline a lot more. Whereas in the first half, he seemed to play a bit central. But Alves was still drifting in. He had an opportunity where he almost scored, where he took the ball, spun, drove in, and put a really good shot in. And the other one that was interesting to see was Michael Golding, who signed from Chelsea. I think he had some nice moments as well. You could tell he was tidy on the ball, good technique, good engine, was moving about. Still very early days, but yeah, it looked like he was being used in Casey McAteer's role. So that was, if we go back to my previous spot, he was the one that was kind of driving in late to the box. McAteer did score though when he was still on the pitch, even though it's in the second half doing that. And then we had Tom Cannon. Good to see him there. He couldn't really get into the game, if I'm being honest. And do you know what I think is interesting though? I don't know if we change instructions, and I have a feeling in the second half, to me, it did feel like we played a bit different actually. In the second half, I felt like we played more of a classic 4-3-3 than we had in the first half. And I say that because I felt that, like, yeah, the Mavididi stroke Alves player did seem to be much more on the wing. And also, the other big thing I'd say, look, maybe it's the personnel rather than the system. But in the first half, Daka was definitely linking play a lot, or Mavididi when they were taking it in turn to do that. In the second half, I felt like Cannon didn't do a particularly good job of that. Just calling it like I see it. But early days, we'll have to see that. And, that's one thing that I think, like, if in last season's system, Enzo might have tried to train, but it's not there. And lastly, let's give a shout out to some of the other two young lads that got to play. So Brandon Cover, we saw him play a few games in the Cup last season as well. He came in. It looked like he at one point was playing. Actually, no, I think he always just played right centre back. So he had an okay game. And yeah, this is a new player, Simon Godwin. I've not really heard of him before. A double-barreled name. I don't think he really
put a foot. Mady Vidua, no?
No, it wasn't him. They said it on the channel quite a few times. I think Wanya, did he come on? You can check that for me. He may have come on at some point, but when we ended, they definitely said this Godwin name quite a few times. The other player that I think is worth mentioning, yeah, we had Luke Thomas and Ben Nelson. I think Thomas, as we said, didn't look great at all with his confidence shot, etc., etc. It's still just an early pre-season, but yeah, that's my take on it. A few more clips here. What we can say, yeah, we can see. Oh, actually, this was interesting when we were defending at this point in time, and you can see, look how serious he is with the beer. He looks like he's going to kill himself. So let's make sure the mental state of Ant is good. But we were defending very deep. I mean, look how compact the block is here. That's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. I mean, when we won the Premier League, actually, something that was really... In fact, look, this is a clear 4-4-2 shape, right? And look how compact the distance is between the back line and the furthest forward player. And, I would say, to be fair, when we won the Premier League, Claudio Ranieri had our defensive block so compact, it was beautiful. It was really difficult because how are you going to play through that? I'm going to give you the answer. You're not. It's really hard to play for a block like that. So you've got to start shifting people around. So that's a really clear 4-4-2 shape. We can see Ricky Pease here in the right back position. That's as standard as you'll get. And what else can we see? Yeah, and just to show here again, building up from the back, we've got the double pivot. Here we've got there's a Suter on the ball. Just start the second half, playing it to Okoli, who played here at the start on the right centre back, but moved to the left. That's it. That's what I've got for you, Neil.
Cool. And he's gone. I think he meant to remove and he left. But yeah, it's kind of thanks for again, Anil, for bringing that. I think he'll be back in just a second. But a couple of things I want to mention just in the meantime. Number one, being I think obviously you mentioned Mavididi as well. Something that we noticed potentially there a little bit is
Drop the mic.
Mavididi was playing. Yeah, I'm out. So Mavididi was playing as that game mentioned number 10 on that left hand side, but it looks like he's put on a lot more muscle and physicality over the summer, and that's something that was, I think, noticeable in this game physically. But I don't know if he showed it that much as much, but something that was quite noticeable about his physical size.
Do you know what? I was really impressed with Mavididi. When I was watching those brief highlights of the Villarreal game, it was also notable in that clip that he'd been used as a forward, not as a wide man. And that's the same thing that we saw this. But to me, he looks like he's going to be a really key player for us this season if he's being used in this role. And you know what? I think there's a lot there to be said. So we signed him and he played as a winger. But when he was in France, he actually played across the front three. in a kind of very sort of fluid position. And, you know, if you think about it, Mavididi on paper, right, he's physical, he's strong, he's technical, and he can finish, right? He had really good stats last season. On paper, someone like that should be perfect for the Premier League, right? And the pace is definitely the thing to talk about, that we can hit teams on the break. He scored today, although it was a very fortuitous set piece, but I still think his all-round display was impressive. And yeah, look, for sure, he was being used way more of a main man. Like, reward a 10. Was he playing the number 10? Not quite, but he definitely wasn't playing as a winger at the moment. So he definitely shone. What I would say that I feel a bit sorry for, and I'm not sure Leicester fans will like it so much, is that Fatawu being shunted off onto the left wing back. Now, I don't know if you got to see this, but I did a show with Luke and I shared some of my formations. And I did actually show him a formation where Fatawu was the left wing back. And he was like, nah, that's never going to happen. And I was like, he was used there for Sporting, and I could definitely see him being used there. And he has been used that way. Now, that doesn't mean that he can necessarily can't do a job or can't even be that good. But to me, it does feel like you're not using someone who was destroying defenses last season. And I remember he scored an absolute worldie against Bournemouth, who was a Premier League team. And how did he score that goal? He scored that goal from his attacking right wing position. And he's even got the number 7 shirt. And who wears the number 7? Normally your right winger. But we'll see. There's many different ways that we could go. For sure, we were relying on Ricardo for the width this time rather than playing in central midfield. Not necessarily a problem. But yeah, that's how I'm seeing. But come back onto Mavididi, yeah, he looked pretty good, to be honest with you. He looked like someone like, you know, if you're ever going to do your fantasy teams and everything like that, if you're looking for a Leicester player, very early doors, but Mavididi would look like the one I would go for. But I do have to say that many years ago, a lot of us said choose Brian Bertrand in your team after you had a few good friendly appearances, and that would have been terrible advice.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think, again, Mavididi can be, because you mentioned a couple of things. Obviously, his technical, his finishing, his pace and his power. And looking at that first lineup of, again, Fatawu in that position, Daka, McAteer, all of them have that similar profile. And I think that was why they were interchanging quite nicely. But coming in, so again, that they work in a similar way where they can kind of chop and change. And at times, maybe as they get to play with each other more, they'll stop getting each other's way. At times, there was a... I know that Enzo used to work on overloads a lot more. Do you think that was happening in the game? Because a lot of the time they were coming over to this left-hand side and creating that overload. So it left Ricardo one-on-one with a defender at that right-hand side to either give a shot in, give a cross in, or provide that final ball.
That's an interesting question. If I'm being brutally honest, if I compare the coaching performance one season on, Steve Cooper to Maresca, I think Maresca comes across as the way superior coach, which is maybe not that surprising, because I think you just mentioned it there quite correctly, that in this game, it definitely felt on multiple occasions like people were getting in each other's way. Now, look, to be fair, that's the whole point of pre-season and training, right? And you would expect that, and you can work on that. And this isn't the first team. But when we did the analysis almost a year to the day with Maresca's Leicester, honestly, I said to you at the time how impressed I was that, like, this is incredible. That, like, in game one, they're all standing in the right positions. They're all doing the cutbacks, the runs, and we identified already, like, Wilfred as an attacking A, and, you know, all the kind of various systems. But look, they're used to playing that system, and now they've had to change their ways. So that's something that we've got to kind of get there. But I didn't see as much of that, if I'm being honest. And look, I think that's interesting because, like, the opposition, again, is quite similar in that we're playing a lower league side. We've had more possession, and we're trying to sort of shunt them out the way a little bit. I would say two things stuck out to me in this game. One, I thought that in general, our playing out from the back was quite poor. To be fair, I think it started off decent and got worse, but we started with probably the stronger team. You know, Danny Ward, he wasn't really doing very good distribution. I think if you compare him to either Stolarczyk or Hermansen, he's really nowhere near as good as that. Now, a lot of us wanted to know why is Stolarczyk not there. Someone has said he's injured. He might even be out for a few months. That's a bit of a blow if that's the case. And without Mads, we're a completely different team. I mean, that does worry me if Chelsea are in for him. And look, I wouldn't blame them for doing it because I suspect knowing Enzo that he'll take them on their pre-season tour. And if he thinks that the keeper can't distribute properly, I mean, look what Guardiola did to Joe Hart. They know that like to play his type of football, you need to have distribution. What I would say from what I've seen so far with Cooper, I don't think it would be as important. I would say that. But I do obviously would not want to lose a player like that because I think he looks like a brilliant player, Matt. The centre backs as well, like we mentioned, Luke Thomas. I thought he was poor in many ways. I feel sorry for him a little bit. Cannot see him really being in. Oh no, really on Stolarczyk?
I think so. Again, from
Well,
Owen Palmer-Atkin, I mean, that's pretty reliable.
well, yeah, then it is. Okay, well, that's a real blow if that's the case. Look, if we keep Mads, you should be okay. But oh god, that does make you think that we're going to see Danny Ward in goal for at least a cup matches.
Confirmed it. Just found it on Twitter actually.
Yeah.
6 months out.
It is. Plus, he's gutted because, like, I think he would have definitely again been the cup goalkeeper, and he might even have got the occasional game. Because I remember, Mads last season, he got injured after game one, so Stolarczyk had to step in for a game or two, I think, before he then came back. But look, at least it's not Mads. That would be, look, we got big respect to Jakob, but if it was our number one, that would have been terrifying. So far we've still got him, and if Chelsea were to take him, they're going to charge them a lot. And even though he's a great keeper, let's just say for argument's sake, we've got given 45 million. I would still be confident we could find a good keeper because last season we spent 5 million on one. I think if you spend 20 million on a keeper, you'll get a very good one. Will they be as good as Mads? Maybe not, but I think they would be like good for our level. Like we're a team that's looking to stay up. Let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. So there we go there. But yeah, coming back to the playing out from the back, that was definitely not as good. And I think, playing through the lines, that was not so bad, actually. I think if there was one thing I would say in this game, I would think the vertical transitions were pretty good, actually. Right? We did it a number of times where the false nine or one of the two forwards, whoever they were, would drop back. Someone else would spin in behind. We'd do the turn. We'd play it in behind. That was working quite nicely. That's a move that we did a lot of times last season. So I think we're looking to replicate and do that more often. That's an encouraging sign. I prefer to see Fatawu getting on the end of it rather than that left wing back, but some good stuff to kind of see there. So there we go. But as you say, I think passing out from the back, maybe positional uncertainty. It didn't look as structured as under Enzo, where we saw these very clear attacking patterns of play. As you say, the overloads, the high eights pressing and things like that. But look, it's early days. And I would say it's not like it's a disaster. Definitely not. I actually saw quite a lot there that made me encouraged. I could see what he was trying to do and how he was trying to do it. Is that the best use of the players that we've got and the way we do it? Not 100% sure on that, but we'll find out as the team progresses. Yeah, I think if I was going to say my biggest fear is I'm not liking what I'm seeing with Fatawu. I just, he could probably do a job
in that position because
that would be my feeling.
In this position, I think he could do the job of Casey McAteer, a player that's on the right and then could cut in, or play on the right. They can cut in, either provide assist and goals. I think that's his position. I think that with Casey, and we'll see what happens with him this season, if we're going to have a person, let's say the squad as it currently is going to be that team. First game of the season, I don't see Casey starting. I see potentially them swapping positions, or somebody coming in that left-hand side, maybe Christensen coming in that left-hand side there, and then Fatawu being pushed that right, that he's able to cut in.
I would much prefer that, I've got to say. But look, I will say, though, let's not put any shade on Casey McAteer. He was really good in this game. Not just his goal, even before his goal. Like, what does Casey McAteer give you? High work rate, intelligent movement, team player, runs, and he's got end product. So he was doing good
as well.
Very good link up. So, I mean, he's been linked to the move to Cardiff. I don't know, man. He's a good squad player. Remember, we lost Yunus Atgun. The interesting thing, though, as well, though, we didn't see Bobby Reid play at all. What I will say, though, again, if you look at Bobby Reid, he played as a winger, but he also has played as a bit of a 10. And again, if you think about the way that Casey McAteer was used, I'm thinking in my head, do you know what? I could see Bobby Reid playing that position as well, the way that particular role is using. So maybe some of the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. I mentioned this Mateus Sule, who I don't think we're going to get him. But for me, the thing that's most interesting about that is that I was thinking in my head, why do we even want him? Like, surely we need the KDH replacement. But if we're playing this particular system, I sort of understand why we're not prioritizing that type of player, because you're going to have Wilfred as a 6 as well and Harry Winks as the double pivot. Who have you got as options? You've got Hamza Chowdhury, and I've just said that Buba Samari actually looked quite good. So you've got 4 players that can play that position. So then you need a different type of if the cam is not really being used in the same way, then, you don't need to do it. Listen, for what it's worth, if it was me, the player that I think we should sign right now, it would be Matt O'Reilly of Celtic. Left-footed, box-to-box, 17 goals, 13 assists last season. Yes, he does play in Scotland, but it is the best team in Scotland. He's played well in Europe. The fact that Atalanta want him says it all. Atalanta are only willing to offer 15, so you could easily gazump them by giving them 22 or something like that. And yeah, I think that would be better in our team. But we have signed Michael Golding there. But let's see how these things pan out. But I'm curious. Yeah.
I think they're waiting to see what happens with Sule. And then they go, if it doesn't work, then the backup option is O'Reilly. I think, again, I've got nothing to back that up, but that's kind of how it feels. Because, again, we're still putting an offer in. We're seeing what happened again this week. We'll probably find out what happens, because it's been, you did a video on it yesterday about there's so much news happening at the moment regarding it. Another player I want to kind of concentrate on, just overall, is Samora. I think Samora did a good job going forward. Good link-up play. If you put him alongside somebody like a Harry Winks, I think he'd shine a lot more, because again, that's really attacking going forward. What did concern me, though, when he tracks back, or we know that Winks defensively he needs some backup, and that's fine. For me, he didn't close down the players enough, put it in challenge, or he was really lacking something defensively. And I think in the formation he's going to play, he's not going to be playing the high positions. So he's going to be able to link the defense and attack. But that means you're going to have to go and get stuck in the dirty side of the game that Wilfred Ndidi does really well, which he did better in the game. I'm not sure that Samora is up for it defensively.
Well, I agree. I mean, look, that's what Brendan has said time and time again, that he won't do that side of the game. So that's no surprise. But look, I think the good news is that he's not going to be the first team player. Like, literally, Wolf has signed on and he's been given a number 6 shirt. That's a shirt change. And if you're wearing a number 6, that's a statement, right? So that is saying that you are the general, you're the governor, Paul Ince style. That's what your position is. You're playing in the middle, and that's going to be your job. So Samara is going to be more option stroke rotation. And don't forget Hamza, who you'd probably start in front of them as well. The thing is, last season, the weird thing is, even though we went in the championship, you have to play way more games, 8 more games. That's quite a considerable amount, right? So, only 38, not quite. That's still a lot, but you can get away with it. And, for this season, I don't think anyone's going to care about the cups, right? Of course, if by some miracle it looks like we're going to stay up easily and then you're still in the cup towards the end of the season, brilliant. But when we play our first League Cup game, I mean, we can use it for fluency, but, they're throwaway games. It's all about staying in the Premier League this season. Will Samare even say? I don't know. But based on that appearance, I think he could still be a reasonable squad player. I don't expect him to see him in the first team. I do think going forward, he looked quite good, though. There's something to work with there. But I do agree with you. And I will say that what were weaknesses in this game? And I would say there were sort of 2 big things that stood out. And it doesn't make the overall performance sound that good. First one was, I don't think we controlled the game particularly well. There were many times that I think if Enzo was there, he'd be going mad. He would be saying, just keep it, be patient, do this. It seemed like, I mentioned it was at times impressive, the vertical transitions, but I think like we were trying it a bit too often and therefore just giving the ball away, right? And there are times, and look, I think that's just going to be a style. I actually think fans might prefer that because it'll be more exciting, but it means you'll lose control of the game, where Enzo will be more like MMA fight, I want to choke you out. The second one is, even though we were good on the vertical transitions, I think we looked bad on defensive transitions the other way. You mentioned Buba kind of not getting stuck in there. In the second half, I remember those guys, they almost had a score, like someone got in down the back right and put across. And, it was like a tame effort in the end, but we were all watching the game just saying, that's Premier League, that's a goal. And that's not even talking about if it's a Liverpool or Man City. Brentford are going to stick that away. Ipswich are going to stick that away because someone's just got into the gap. You got three at the back. So where are the gaps on either side? If you can hit it into the channel, someone's got in, they've picked out the pass easily. I think someone did a bad job defensively. It might have been Godwin, maybe. I don't want to call him out if it wasn't. So I don't know who it was, but someone basically didn't challenge their man
It was
properly.
Marcel. Let me see if I can find the.
Yeah, it looked like him, but I'm not sure he actually played. So let's find out if that was the case. Was he subbed on?
So he came
He
on
was
27.
Cody. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna have to revise my my diagrams here. That's fair enough. Yeah, it was him. It was definitely him. So, but look, it was on the transition. I don't expect to see that. Well, I think we all know that Wanya's probably going to go out on loan as well. He's even said that. But yeah, I'm just saying that in against the lower opposition team, we look poor in a transition. That's something. And look, Sean Dyche has said this so many times. He says the Premier League now is all about transitions. You are at your most vulnerable, actually, when you have the ball, as bonkers as that sounds, right? Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's why he plays boring football. But look what a good job he did with Everton. And to be fair to them, he has adapted his style. They don't just play a boring football. They do just play, I wouldn't even say they're handbrake on like Gareth Southgate for England. They actually play quite a structured way. He just knows that at certain times you have to have the right people in the right place because that is going to kill you when you're in a transition. That said, look, what's interesting is that playing Shrewsbury is going to be very unlike any game we play in the Premier League. Not because like the opposition, but more the state of the game. We're not going to be the sort of team that has control of the ball. If we're being not control of the ball, we're not going to have the lion's share of possession. I don't think. I think compared to last season, games will probably be at best sort of 50-50. And I expect against a lot of games, if you go through the entire top 10, Man City will have more possession. Arsenal will have more possession. Liverpool will have more possession. Villa will probably have more possession. Spurs will have more possession. Chelsea will have more possession. Man United, last season, they probably wouldn't actually, to be fair. This season, don't know. You can keep going down the list. So because of that, well, Ipswich, they play an interesting style. Like, last season, they only had 53% possession. So they don't really play that way. They play more about the quick vertical transition. It is interesting because of the teams that have got promoted, what some people have said is they said that they think of the three teams promoted, Ipswich are the most likely to stay up. And the reason they're the most likely to stay up is because the style of football they play. Like if Leicester try and play their control and suffocate the opposition that they played in the Championship, well, Burnley tried that and it didn't work. So to be fair to Steve Cooper, that's why a lot of us are saying that low key, actually having Steve Cooper might be better for us because he isn't going to be stubborn and he will play what it takes to get results rather than being fixated on something. So, and we already just saw it in this game. In this game, we weren't trying to control the possession as much. That's good and bad. So that's something to think about. The other team will be Southampton, and Southampton have got Russell Martin, and I don't think he's going to change his style of play. So actually, I think a lot of people are saying that they're probably the most likely to get relegated because they have a weak squad. They were the third team that came up, and they're probably going to play a style that isn't particularly, suitable. You're basically trying to play a system that's great if you're better than the opposition, but if you're worse than the opposition, well, Burnley found out to their cost what that can do to you. So we'll have to see that. So yeah, that's just some kind of brain farts and thinking around those sort of aspects.
No, I hear you, and I think some of the negative things I want to mention as well. Not to kind of harp on again, it's pre-season. It is going to go. It's not to say that it's going to go wrong. And with you in terms of about Enzo could be a better manager in terms of man management and formation and things like that. But the problem is that comes with that dogmatic style where you could only play this way.
Yeah.
To play devil's advocate, the fact that we've got multiple plays we can play players in different positions. I think a couple of things that let them down. Bad passing just across the park.
Yeah.
Basic passing that was missing. I'm not saying that's never going to be there. I'm not slandering the team. I'm saying that does need to be improved going forward. Basic passes were going awry. And that's not something that Steve Cooper is in control of. A basic pass is a basic pass, needs to be executed well. As you mentioned, the positions can be a little bit confusing because they're going to different slots. And I think, do you think there's an element of again, this might maybe just be kind of hallucinating, but Pep Guardiola used to say, my job is to get you to the final third. Your job is then to finish it off from there. Do you think there was an element of that, especially in the first half? Because it seemed like it was quite fluid, people picking up different positions, kind of taking up, but again, people getting each other's way at the same time. But do you think there was an element of my job is to get you into the final third, your job is to finish off and get the back of the net?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I liked his structure. It was kind of 5 back, 5 forwards, and you do the attack that way.
A little bit of that in the first half.
Yeah, which I think makes it clearer because, like you've said it a few times. Like, actually, one thing I think is interesting is you said, well, it's not Cooper's fault that the passes went astray, but I think that's not entirely the case because one reason why passes will go astray is you don't know where the man is that you're going to play the pass, right? If that makes sense. So if you think about it, right, for example, Enzo used the left-sided centre back when he could, because he wanted to have it that like everyone can receive the ball in the right position and they know who to pass to immediately, and you stand in certain places. And another thing you've mentioned in a few times during the show is like people standing in the right places and not being on top of one another. Like, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad, but for example, England, who recently got to the final in the European Championships, at times like Bellingham, Kane, Foden, they were all standing on top of one another. It's like you all want to be the number 10, but you can't all be the number 10. I'm sorry to say. So someone's got to stretch the play. Someone's got to move out wide if you don't do that. So it's still early days. This is definitely not going to be the starting lineup when we get to game 1. There'll probably be quite a few changes. And I think more what's interesting and, why I wanted to jump on the show today is just to call it how we see it. And let's see, okay, here's how we've seen this appearance. Let's see what happens in the next one. Let's see what happens on the next one. There's some major characters still to enter this season of the Leicester City story. Who's those characters? A certain Jamie Vardy, a certain Mads Manson. Bobby Reed has been signed. I'm sure we're going to see him a little bit. And the great redeemer himself, Yannick Vestergaard, what role will he play? So I think there's a lot more to see what happens first. I found it quite a fascinating game for all these reasons.
I'm with you. And I think, it's only preseason, as you mentioned. There's still, it's good to see the team and what plans and what changes. As you mentioned, a lot of the teams, I think Casey McAteer, Cody, and Winks have all said, we've made little tweaks, little amendments. There's been some pretty big changes from what we've seen with players playing in different positions. The best example is probably Ricardo, coming from the inverted position to playing really high up and playing as basically a winger as well. Another player that wants a couple of players that we've not seen, of young players that are really talented in the attack positions, Golding and Alves. Now, we didn't really see both of them too much, even though they played about half an hour. Both did some kind of tidy things. Alves had a shot that went wide. But in that system, because again, I think he changed systems a little bit, playing like a one striker up front and then 2 in behind.
Yeah. I agree with that. The second half, the first half, it felt more different to that. The second half, it definitely felt more like that. If you're going to ask me how do I think it went, I still think it's exciting. I mean, that is more of the kind of almost 3-4-3 again that England played, where they played 2 number 10s in Jude Bellingham and Phil Foden behind Harry Kane at one point in the European Championships. I think it's got potential to go that way. I think the Golding one, I think, is more interesting because I believe he's supposed to be more of a box-to-box midfielder, but he was playing further up there. So it'll be interesting to see what his role is. But they both had some nice touches. Alves is still an exciting player. I'm interested to see what they do with him because I know a lot of people saying he could go out on loan. But I mean, he did show in this game already that he's willing to drive at people and have a go. And, Premier League's 5 subs, impact player. I mean, there's a real, merit to having people that in 30 minutes can change the game. Could be one of those. I mean, that's again, like, kind of disappoints me a bit is the player that I really want to see driving at them is Fatawu. We've mentioned a few times because who's the best at doing that? Like, if you look at his stats last season, Fatawu, ridiculous. He created the most chances of any player in the championship, and it wasn't even close. In terms of threat created and things like that. Maybe not necessarily an assist, but if you look at like the things that didn't come up, I've seen the stats for it. It's like almost elite levels. So, you want to utilize a player like that. But We didn't see much of them, but I think they look half decent. I think the bigger thing that I noticed in that second half is that we weren't getting the ball to them enough. That was the big shame, and that's not their fault. It was being given away, playing out from the back. The back to front just wasn't getting there at all. The goal came from JJ playing it over the top. There's nothing wrong with that. So again, I don't think in the second half, especially, I think Ward's distribution was poor. I hate to say it, but Okoli did not look good on the ball. That worries me because if I'm just going to be brutally honest, I don't think Enzo would have signed a player like that. I think it's interesting. I don't know if you saw today, but Chelsea are going to be selling Trevor Chalobah. And you know what? Knowing Enzo Maresca, I can totally understand why. Because he's like, yeah, I get it. Chalobah is like a good physical, good at defending, but he's not good enough on the ball. To play my system, you've got to be good on the ball. Now, look, again, we're playing Cooper ball. We're not playing Maresca ball. Enzo ball's dead. Long live Cooper ball. So maybe we don't need that. And maybe having the physicality and pace is more that we'll need. But I'll be honest with you, that was a little bit scary. He didn't look great, if I'm being honest.
He looked physical, but again, his passing wasn't good enough. I didn't really see him with his pace as well. He was a little bit suspect. Another player, again, Luke Thomas, I think his Leicester career is pretty all but done at this point. Playing against League One opposition, he looked pretty much by far away the worst player on the pitch.
Yeah, he was getting cooked.
And that's not me trying to dig him out of a hole. It's just trying to, again, as you mentioned, just call it how it is. It's a shame, but again, it looks like his career has taken a nosedive because that's a League One opposition, and I'm not expecting to be, but his levels were low in that. What else going to mention? Yeah, it's just so. What else going to mention? There's going to be some other things. Because Steve Cooper's been interviewed by Jason Bourne. Just give you a couple of other things to mention. So again, he confirms Solarchek is out for 6 months. Germany, Vardy. So again, that's a big loss. We're gonna have to see what happens then, because most likely that Danny Ward will be the number 2. Because I doubt they'll go and sign somebody else. Vardy returned for the Germany trip. Again, not too much. Also, this is an interesting point I want to mention. Looking at the number of players to bring in, even joke there's some more, but they haven't made names yet. So again, he's saying there's even more players that are going to come in. But he doesn't know the exact number. But looks like from the sounds of it, again, we're reading into this. There's quite a few players that might be coming in, and I think he also mentioned about, again, Steve KDH loss in the summer. Again, we've got to look forward now. We've got to replace him in certain other positions. We're trying to again go and look forward. So it seems like there's quite a few players in that position. There's quite a few players that we're potentially trying to bring in, not just 1 or 2.
Yeah, that makes sense because the squad looks extremely thin, and you do need a deep squad. I mean, as it stands, this team is weaker than it was last season. That's just a fact. That's not, trying to make a mountain of a molehill. Compared to wingers, we've lost Eunice. I suppose we brought in Bobby Reed. Defenders, the Callum Doyle's gone back. Okay, we brought in Okoli. Vardy's 1 year older. We've lost, obviously, our talisman, Dewsbury Hall. Literally, I know Somerville won player of the season in the end, but Leeds didn't get promoted and Leicester did. So in my opinion, the player of the season was Dewsbury Hall because he got us up. That's a huge loss, the amount of goals and assists and chance creation he did. Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, it feels like we're like probably 3-4 players short. I know people really dislike him. I thought Daka actually had quite a good game. I think maybe he should have scored, but that's a promising display. I think he probably will be the starting striker, if I'm being honest. Is him and Vardy enough? They have mentioned that they might want another one if Cannon goes. And to be honest with you, I think that sounds more realistic, if I'm being honest. I think, again, based on today, I wasn't so impressed with what Cannon did. Having at least another winger makes total sense. So I can understand the Sule one, although it does feel to me that if you're going to be spending that much money on someone, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know why the Cam hasn't been already signed. That's my brutal honesty. Like, he says that we need to replace him. So, yeah, maybe they have got something in the works. But, last season, by now, we'd already signed some key players. Who were those players that we'd signed? We'd already signed Cody. We'd already signed Winks. I think we'd already signed Mavididi even. And I remember he hadn't played, but at the end of the match, they asked him, "Oh, you've been linked with Mads Hermansen. What do you have to say on that?" And he goes, "He's a really good player." So he didn't say that like he would sign him, but he basically said we had signed him, and then he turned up for the next friendly game. So there were things to be there, and but look, the thing is you do get this kind of like it's a bit like buying a house, right? It's a chain, right? So you have to buy this player, then that player becomes available, then that player becomes available, and you can move on there. And you could see moves being made all the way until the end of the August when the window gets closed. I mean, we said already one other player that had been linked earlier today was Wout Weghorst, which is quite interesting. I could see that happening. And actually, having seen the game today, I could see why he would be used, because I think the way that he's utilized to kind of drop deep and spin in behind. And also, you know, I don't think you should knock it. Like all teams in the Premier League press you. So if you're getting pressed, if you have a great keeper with an elite distribution in Mads Hermansen, and you have a striker up top who you can ping it to and you can trust is going to be able to hold the ball, get it down on the deck, not just keep it in the air, get it down on the deck and play in somebody else. And then you've got explosive players like Mavididi, Fatawu, Ricardo, McAteer potentially, etc., etc. Don't think that's the worst thing in the world as a cheapish option. I could see that happening. If the way that I've seen us play, I could see that makes sense. The cam, I feel probably going to need some more depth. I don't know. The defense didn't look great to me, if I'm being honest. But you could argue that only Justin is the only one that's going to start, because last season, what was it? It was Vestergaard, Wout Faes, and Justin. And Faes also wasn't back either because he's probably been away. So, you know, maybe if you bring in the other two, although I don't know. I mean, a lot of us are scared the last time we saw what happened with Wout at the, you know, in the Premier League, Vestergaard too. But we can't say this. We're just speculating on things we haven't seen.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think another thing that we've seen a little bit, I think you mentioned it previously, it's the first time we've seen Harry Souttar in a back three, in the centre of a back three. And again, he did okay. His physical presence was there, but his passing out for the back was 6 out of 10. Nothing really to shout about. But again, when you're coming up to the league and you're trying to stay in the Premier League, you can't afford a 6 out of 10.
We couldn't pass it out against Shrewsbury Town. That's the reality. Last season, I think we played, was it Burton? And we did play the way out from the back. So that's just calling a spade a spade. It's like, if I was the coach and I saw my team couldn't play out against League One opposition, I'm not sure I would go that way, or I wouldn't play those players. But that was second half. First half, we were a bit better at it. But it was a worry for sure, in my opinion.
I'm with you. I think that's pretty much everything that we've got to cover there. Any final thoughts? Because I've really got. We didn't even touch on the goals really. Mavididi again wasn't too much because it was a set piece. I think that's one thing that we are missing. Is probably a set piece specialist in the team, somebody that can 100%. Take a free kick and really put it in the back of the net. And then obviously we mentioned a little bit about the McAteer goal. Again, good taken goal. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're hyper-analysing it to the point where we'll see what happens in the next game. It's still, again, a load of players that aren't really going to be part of the first team. They're still in this squad. And we've still got a win. So hopefully the players will take confidence from that.
Yeah, exactly. So next game, I believe, is on Friday against Palermo, being played in Chesterfield for some reason. Okay, very interesting. And then I think the next one isn't until their German trip, which is a little bit later on against Augsburg. I've got a feeling that game will be more important. He's mentioned that Vardy might be available for that game. You can bet the international lads will be. So I think now it's still about getting minutes in the tank. Maybe you're getting a few ideas. That game, I think, would be the one where I'd be more like, okay, we might get a more serious idea. And then the final one against Lens, that'll be interesting to see. I think, to be fair with Leicester, one thing I have noticed is that, generally speaking, in the last friendly, you do seem to be getting way more up to, you know, what you'd expect it to be. Last season, obviously, was a bit of a shit show because of the whole playing in Thailand and monsoon thing. So luckily, Enzo did a great job, I felt. Although I think you could see game one was a challenging one, wasn't it, against Coventry, and it didn't look too good.
Got away with it.
He did, but I don't think that was his fault, as was proved, because, you know, he kind of been screwed. But in previous seasons, you know, I know he got injured, but for example, I remember the Villarreal game where we looked really good. We played Atalanta one year. I think we looked really good as well. So, yeah, I think the last game will be a much better way to judge. And you know, you can't ever bring too much into friendlies, because the season that we won the league, I think we lost to Oxford in pre-season or something like that. So it really doesn't matter. But yeah, I think
Well,
looking
we
at
didn't win the year we won the league. I don't think we
yeah,
won a game, or we won maybe one game. We lost majority of them, and then went on
yeah,
to win the league. So again,
yeah,
preseason only matters if it carries through to the rest. If the positivity carries through to the end of the season, I've got a feeling that we are going to start the season quite strongly.
well, I hope so. Game 1 against Spurs will be the last to play, won't we? We're the first Monday night this season, so that's an interesting one. So, given our points penalty, we're basically, actually, you know what? We may not be bottom of the table, because what could happen is another team could also have a points penalty, and based on goal difference, they could be below us. But most likely, you know, we might already be like 9 points adrift come game 1. Now, it won't be, because not every team can win, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I agree. It was an interesting one. It's fun. Do you know if the next game is going to be streamed or not?
I have no idea. I think I think from now on they
Yeah.
will be.
Okay.
Again, I've got nothing to back that up. But again, gut feeling. I think that when it says behind closed doors, essentially it means they're not going to be
No.
filmed.
Yeah.
If they're not saying behind closed doors, it's going to be filmed and live streamed.
Just before we go, we've got to say one thing though. To charge fans £10 to see a pre-season friendly is absolute beep. That should not be on. And you know what? You got to call a spade a spade. The way that the club currently are treating its fans, they're not treating them like fans. They're treating them like customers. So if anyone from the club watched this, I think you should know that the fans are not happy with the way that you're treating your loyal fans that have followed the club for years, you know, through thick and thin. That's not on, in my opinion. In fact, I could say it's outrageous.
And it's not just that; it's the family clubs you mentioned, but having a Bitcoin sponsor, gambling sponsor. There's also the £25 charge. There's also the season tickets season tickets go up. We understand that, but again, the amount that is going up by, and we are again being more and more alienated from the club, and the shirt price is going up. Now that again, it's we understand it to a certain degree. Prices go up, but it's again the number of them, and these aren't just little moves. These are going to again they do what's the word? They compile over time.
Yeah, I mean,
So
look at the lack of explanation on the manager and selling our best player. That's outrageous. I think that's terrible. If it was me that was running it, I would make a statement and I'd say, listen, fans, it's extremely disappointing that we've lost both our manager and our best player that came through the youth academy. Here are the reasons why we had to do that. And here are the things we're going to do to make sure that we're strong financially for the future, etc., etc. It's just radio silence. Oh, but £10 to watch a preseason game. Outrageous. Anyway, on that salt, I will leave you to it.
yeah, I'm with
Any
you. All
comments from the audience?
Let me have a look. What was it called? How did Danny Ward look on corner free kicks? Tentative, I think would be the right word to use. Doors in again. Appreciate Doors Forest fan. So again, doing all right. Again with one game, we have to see as well.
100% win ratio so far, Steve Cooper.
Yeah, and 100% goals scored, even if their own goals.
Yeah.
Again, already going to Atalanta, so nothing too much. But we need to find a Saudi buyer. Yeah, I can kind of see that. But again, I don't think that's going to be this season. But yes, Jessica here as well. Yeah, Pity Club needs to pay attention. Exactly what did we play well? We played all right. Again, we've got the whole stream to go back and watch over, but there's nothing too much to worry about at the moment. There are concerns, but again, it's very, very early on. But again, thank you for your comments. Like, subscribe. We'll try and get something filmed, but I know I'm busy the next 2 Saturdays, so I don't know if we'll be able to get something out on the channel. But again, thanks Anna for joining, and we'll see you all in the next video. So goodbye.
See you later.